Hi everyone, glory to Jesus Christ. So I got a very lovely message a couple days ago in my YouTube inbox asking me for some comments on something. And this is going to be the response to that. I figured that rather than making a private video that one person could see, or rather than writing an email, I could make a public video, and of course removing all identifying information. I'm not trying to spread someone's business around the internet, but I thought that maybe that I could say something that could be helpful, perhaps in some way, to more than one person. So if so, awesome. If not, we cool. So the issue was, and this person said, I'm not a religious person, but I've tried to learn a lot about the various major religions of the world, and I consider myself to know a lot about them at this point, but I still have this pain. The exact phrase was, I feel like my spirit is gone. I feel like my spirit is missing. I have this pain, and sometimes I write verse to try to help me with that, and sometimes it helps me temporarily, but I still feel that something is missing. Your thoughts, please. Which is that's an excellent issue to be thinking about. And I think most of us at some point have found ourselves in a situation similar to that. And I certainly, speaking personally, I have. And in the prison, I meet a lot of people who are in this situation. So let's talk about that pain. The spiritual pain that we have as humans, and we all have it, by the way, that spiritual pain is actually God-given, believe it or not. And that's because it's a spiritual fire alarm. It's telling you, sorry, my little, there. Hopefully you can still see me. I just had a little, warning that popped up on the screen. Anyway, that pain, when we feel that pain, what God is telling us is, there's something wrong here. There's a problem. Physical pain, is unpleasant, of course, but it can save your life because it can tell you, oh, well, you have a disease here, or, oh, you're injured, right? So spiritually, it's the same deal. Spiritually, that's God alerting us to the fact that space in our heart, I call it the God hole, that space in our heart is either empty or it's filled with something that is not God, and that's a problem. So it's saying, you got to address this, you got to address this, you got to address this. So it's not something that we have to like, that pain, but it's really useful. And we get into a lot of trouble when we think of it as something to be squashed or ignored, rather than a symptom of a disease, spiritually, that needs healing. Now, we don't like to do that healing. We don't like to do that research. We don't like to put forth this effort, because what happens is it's easy to go after comfort. It's easy to fill that hole with a variety of things. We all do this. Entertainment, money, sex, addiction to power, addiction to the praise of people, political office. It could just be even something like writing the great American novel, or making a film, could be a way to try to stop that hole in the Hoover Dam with your pinky. When we finally get to the point where we realize that our own human efforts are insufficient and that nothing that we're trying to pour down this hole is really helping, that's painful. That's a painful realization, predominantly because all of the creature comforts that we've been seeking are not doing it. So that means we have to give up the pursuit of those creature comforts. We have to give up the idolatry of those creature comforts in order to let God take his place there, in order to let God fill that gap. And anytime we break a habit, it's hard and it can be painful. It's painful in the case of humanity because you and I are not guilty of the sin of Adam and Eve. We are not guilty of the sin of anyone else, actually, except for ourselves. But we do bear in our persons, we do bear that attraction to sin. and that tendency to sin and that tendency to turn away from God. That is a consequence of the first sin. So that means that we have habits, and those habits are hard to break, and those habits are often painful to break, and they can cause problems in the people around us too when we're trying to break habits, and all of a sudden people are going, hey, what are you doing? Why aren't you going out carousing with me? Why aren't you, going to the porn store with me? Why aren't you, whatever it is. So that can create a lot of interpersonal tension too. But seeking comfort is ultimately going to be fruitless because of that. Because seeking comfort is going to lead us back to the world. And when we say the world, we mean not God's creation, but we mean the fallen aspect of the world. That's going to lead us back there. So we have to do more difficult work. And it can help to remember this when we're doing that work, that the peace of Christ passes all understanding, right? Peace I leave with you, not as the world gives do I leave with you. This is in the Gospels, and it's also in the epistles in the second half of the New Testament. What that means is, not as this world gives. That means that if the spiritual comfort that we are trying to get, or the spiritual comfort that we're getting on a superficial level, is comfortable in the worldly sense, if it's popular in the worldly sense, if we are not working and struggling, that comfort is not from Jesus Christ. So, and that's a tough realization too. That the peace of Christ doesn't always initially seem to be peaceful. But that's because we're talking about eternal peace, not peace right now, tomorrow at 10 a.m. And even St. Paul, writes about this. Philippians 2:12. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Work out. It's not a one-time event. Salvation's a process. And in the Orthodox Church, we call that synergistic salvation because it is a process. God, of course, God alone saves, obviously. But we have to try to cooperate with him. We have to act in a manner that is consistent with really wanting that salvation and not just saying that we want it or not just wanting it sometimes or wanting it when we're in a good mood. That's synergistic salvation. We can't earn our way into heaven, but we are expected to act the right way, and we're going to fail because we're sinners, but that means we get up, we dust ourselves off, or we ask God to dust us off, we repent, and then we move on. We keep trying, we keep pressing toward that goal. It's the only way, right? If you do not have a Bible that has the wisdom of Solomon in it, so if you don't have a Bible that is the Orthodox canon or the Catholic canon, I would really recommend that you get one because that book contains some very, very helpful thoughts on this issue. King Solomon writes, for example, in chapter 17, he's talking about the ancient Egyptians who were pursuing Israel when they were fleeing, actually when they were suffering the plagues first, and then when they were pursuing the Israelites through the Red Sea. But he's talking about the spiritual darkness as much as the actual literal plague of darkness. And he's saying, well, over those men, heavy night was spread, an image of darkness that was about to receive them. They were heavier than the darkness to themselves. That's what we're doing. We're responsible for a lot of our own spiritual darkness, And again, in chapter 19, he writes, again, actually, about the Egyptians, but each sought the way through his own doors. And that's the futility that comes from trying to make our own truth. So, having established all of that, I'm not done yet, but I am done with this particular video because I'm coming up on 10 minutes and I don't want to have to stop at an awkward place. So I'm going to stop this here and then I'm going to start the camera right back up again in about 20 seconds. So, part 2, coming right up.